Can you see
Oh,
me
there we
now?
go.
All right.
Okay, hi, nice to see you. Nick is actually the director of the Diamond Cutter Classics project, and I was telling some friends that I designed this project about 35 years ago, but we didn't have any funding. And recently, in the last 7 or 8 years, we have 12 ancient translators of ancient texts. We are doing books from the whole 2,500-year history of this ancient Asian wisdom. And actually, Nick is doing one of the earliest books in that tradition, and it's by somebody named Nagarjuna. And Nick is right now in Portugal. He recently moved to Portugal and with his family, probably to be near the best beaches, I think. And I don't know. We're gonna have two sections about Nick's book, and I would say, Nick, how would you like to introduce your book?
Okay. Well, I'm now working on a different Nagarjuna book, but the 60 verses on reasoning that, I have passed off to you to edit and, really work on and bring it to completion. I would say that this book is a very amazing and complex book of philosophy that is explaining to people who believe that they accept. So let me even clarify a little bit more. I'm sorry. Within, the ancient teachings, there's different schools of philosophy. There's people who we say have like a more superficial understanding of the profound concept of emptiness. Sometimes we refer to them as the lower schools. And then there's people with a more complex and comprehensive understanding of emptiness, and we think of them as higher schools of philosophy. And in this book, the 60 verses on reasoning, Master Nagarjuna is showing the practitioners who claim to have a certain understanding of emptiness, which we would call superficial. He's showing them that they actually accept the more complex view of emptiness, or the more complete view of emptiness. And really, that's the only view of emptiness that makes any sense. And that at the heart of it all, this is the conclusion the book seems to come to, is that nothing has any nature of its own, not even the process of things coming into existence independence upon one another.
Yeah, I think in fact, I was working on it this morning. I had an extra few minutes, and we're working on the introduction to the book. And it's kind of this very tricky thing where Nagarjuna came about 700 years after Gautama. And in between him and Gautama, 700 years, there grew a school called Abhidharma. And they got very famous for teaching. It's like an encyclopedia of everything you want to know, like how did the world start? And how did the first people come to this world? And like that, it's almost like science, and it doesn't talk a lot about emptiness. And then came Nagarjuna after 700 years. And he's talking to these guys and he says, oh, you guys, congratulations. I love your emptiness teachings, And they're like, huh? We don't have any emptiness teachings. And he says, no, of course you do. Uh, you have the greatest emptiness teachings. They're called dependent origination, You guys are the masters of emptiness teaching. And then he wrote a whole book about, and it's a weird argument, right, Nick? It's like convincing somebody that they're smart, but they don't know that they're smart, And I don't know. This morning, I especially enjoying. I was doing this verse. It's verse 31, and I'll read it. Okay, and it says, "We introduce them, those who lack an understanding of the meaning of that sheer absence, pure emptiness, with simply getting used to hearing about it. And he says the first 700 years was just a warm-up, and we were just helping people get used to it. Now I'll give you a quiz, Nick. And then he relates it to a bodhisattva vow. He relates it to a vow for bodhisattvas. He says the first 700 years was just preparing what, Nick?
Warming people up.
Yeah,
for teachings on emptiness.
Yeah, the vow is called Majanto Niten, which means
not teaching emptiness to someone who's not yet mentally prepared.
Yeah, nice. And then the whole this whole book seems to it's a weird book because he's telling somebody you understand emptiness, but you don't understand that you understand emptiness. You know, so Nick, I'm thinking that Tsongkhapa often ties things together. And he wrote this book called, that we're translating, called The Praise of Dependent Origination, or Thank You for Teaching Dependent Origination. But he does it with a special twist that I think he got from Nagarjuna, who lived 1,200 years before him. What's the twist? If somebody asks you, Nick, this guy is claiming that if you understand cause and effect, then you understand emptiness. How would you answer somebody who said, hey, Nick, you know, you translated this book. How come I understand emptiness if I understand cause and effect?
Yeah, that's a tough one. From working so much on this book, I have to think that the reason is because one of the cool things about dependent origination is that it is also empty. It is, and it's the fact that it's empty that we can change ourselves into, you know, Buddhas.
Yeah, and I think where they get into the emptiness of cause and effect is, and by the way, which, you know, Jetsun Kappa really expressed it well. And by the way, Jetsun Kappa was a fan of your book. And we have a record of Jetsun Kappa giving a lecture about your book. And his main student, Gyaltsab wrote a record of the lecture. And it's a fascinating lecture. We also found out through our research from ALL, John Brady's project, that Tsongkhapa's teacher, who was Rendal from the Sakya tradition, he actually gave a lecture first about this. He was fond of this book. And then he taught it to Jet Tsongkhapa and Gyaltsab, and then Tsongkhapa taught it again to Gyaltsab, and then Gyaltsab taught it to us. But to get into the emptiness of a cause and effect, what would you say, Nick, if I say, look, Nagarjuna is saying that when a seed opens up and turns into a tree, that proves emptiness. What's going on there proves emptiness. Why? What would you say?
That is one of the reasons I got into Nagarjuna. So, I mean, you know, I'm sure that this question you're asking me is probably one of the reasons I was so intrigued to follow these teachings so closely and made it my life's work. And I think it's amazing, and it's hard to articulate every time. But if you have a seed and you think about, you know, if you put a seed in the ground and you put dirt and it gets enough light and water, then that seed will produce a sprout, where the seed is the cause and the sprout is the result. The sprout is the result of the seed. So then we'd have to ask ourselves, well, what's the definition of a cause? The definition of a cause is something that produces a result. And what would we say? How could we define a result? Well, it's something that comes from a cause. Okay, sounds good. Seed sounds like it's a cause. Sprout sounds like it's a result. So if the seed is a cause, then it has to be something that produced a result. But when the seed is there, while the seed exists, is there a sprout?
No.
The sprout didn't come yet. So is there a result? No. So how could the seed be a cause if the definition of a cause is a thing that produced a result? And we could say the same for the sprout. When the sprout has come, is there a seed? No. And so if you have this thing and the definition of a result is something that came from a cause, but
Yeah.
the seed is not there, there's no cause. So what, then there is no cause and there is no result. So it must have something to do with labels coming from our mind.
Yeah.
This is what I took away from that.
There's this cool idea that, and by the way, you guys stop me when I run out of time. I got 2 minutes. We're gonna cut in 2 minutes, Nick, and come back. But the idea is, if two things share a relationship, like being married to your wife, right, Nick? You share a relationship. You both have to be there at the same time. You can't say that something that existed 10 years ago is having a relationship with something that came out 10 years later. And since the seed turns into the tree, it's impossible for them to have a relationship, because when the tree's there, the seed is gone. And when the seed's there, the tree is gone. So Nagarjuna is the master of saying, God, something weird's going on. Seeds and trees have relationship. That's cause and effect. That's the most important relationship in the ancient teachings for 700 years before him. But how can they have a relationship if they're never in the same room at the same time? I don't know. We're going to come back to that after we cut back to the news and find out more news in the world. Back to you, news guys, and your interview.